Welcome back. I got asked a really good question in the comments, and that was, what do I use personally to fuel on the bike rides? And before I reveal that, I just want to do a quick cycling nutrition 101 just to make sure we're all on the same page. So number one rule for me is I want to keep the carbs nice and high. The other thing I try and avoid is protein and fat. Now, protein is great for recovery post-ride, but like fat and even fiber as well, if those are high in the snack you're on the bike, it can slow down your digestion and cause you all sorts of problems. Now, for me personally on the bike, I aim for about 80 to 100 grams of carbs an hour. And it might seem quite high, but here's a really good example of why it's so important we keep our fuel high. And personally, for me, why I sometimes try and aim for a little bit higher. And this is one of those things I would have loved someone to have told me, especially when I started cycling, because once it clicks, it makes so much sense why it's so important and why it's such a good idea to aim slightly higher. So I've got this match here, and I've also got the cozy fireplace behind me. And this is going to represent our carb burn, because as soon as we wake up, we're burning fuel, we're burning carbs. So that's now lit. And so if I push harder, it burns quicker. And if I ease off the pace, it slows down. Now when it hits the end, that means I'm going to bonk, I'm going to be in trouble. But if I go ahead and add an extra gel, then as I burn through my carb intake, as I start pushing a little harder, once we hit our second gel, we're now burning that fuel, and we want to keep that continuously burning down to the end. I'm really panicking, I'm going to burn my fingers here. What we want to do is make sure it never gets to the end, because that's when we bonk, and it makes it really hard to top up later. Now this is something really important, because even when you're at a cafe stop, you're still burning. That match is still burning. And so it's really important, and this is why it's going to make sense in a second when I reveal what I use. Let's kick off with the most common source of fuel on the bike that's pretty much everywhere, which is gels. Now for me, I aim for about 80 to 100 grams of carbs an hour on the bike. And unless you're on like Zwift indoors, where it's really easy to see how long you've got left on a workout or how long you've actually been working out for, I've now got it on my bike outside on my Garmin, but I have a timer lapse, so I can see roughly every 20 minutes, I'm trying to get some sort of fuel in. And why I aim usually on the higher end for about 100 grams of carbs an hour, is just so it gives me a bit of a buffer. Like you saw with the matches, I don't want to get to the point where I'm running on the edge or I forget. So by setting a timer, or some sort of alert every 20 minutes to remind me to refuel is really important. And by having slightly more, I have that buffer. So when it comes to gels, there's tons to choose from. They pretty much all do the same thing. I tend to go with whatever's cheapest. Decathlon do these energy gels. They're literally just called energy gel, 30 grams of carbs. And I think it's 24 pounds for a box of 24. You then get the really high-end stuff like Sturka. And if it was one brand I could be sponsored by, I would totally say it'd be Sturka. I absolutely love their products, but these are great. 2 of these an hour easily helps me hit that 100 gram target I'm looking for. These are also dual fuel, so you got fructose and maltodextrin as well. What that means is you don't tend to get that typical GI distress like you tend to get when you just have a single source of carbohydrate, like sugar, for example. Now, if you're really on a budget, I've got some really good hacks here, and I've actually got to give a shout out to the Hench Herbivore. He's the hench one, I'm the fast one, and it was actually going to Home Bargains, of all places, really cheap gels. Obviously, golden rule, try these out indoors before you go out and use them on a ride. So I found this one here. It was 40p or something like 42p for a gel, and it had loads of them in there. I even picked up this whole box. There's 8 SIS gels in here, and it was like £4.50. So that's actually quite cheap and a really good offer. So definitely check out Home Bargains. Another place to check out, which has started bringing in a lot of sports products now, is NutriCircle. I've been using them. They're my secret, not sponsored by them, but this is where I've been picking up tons of things like protein powder, snacks, and even now they're doing gels as well. They've recently had a big influx of high five products and SIS, so that's a really good place to go if you need gels. Obviously, with the colder weather, it gets a bit harder to open them. They're a little bit messy and they're a little bit expensive. And it's also the perfect segue into carb mixes, because this is what I do. This is my ultimate cost-saving hack, but also a great way. I tend to mix this up with gels, and what I'm about to talk about now, which is Mega Gel. So shout out to Jesse Coyle for tipping me off on this. I picked these up off AliExpress. They're just simply called a flask. You might see it called like a running flask or a cycling flask. This is the 500 milliliter one. You can get it in a 250, and I think there's an even smaller one, like a 125. And it's not perfect. I've done this with a scale, but you can roughly get whatever the size is minus about 50 grams worth of carbohydrate in there. So in here, I can get about 450 grams of sugar. If I'm aiming for 100 grams an hour, this one mega gel, which is easy to grab and store in my back pocket, has got 4 hours of fuel. And I've already given it away. The go-to fuel is sugar. That's pretty much what gels are. Unless you're using dual source, this is pretty much what it is. And my top tip as well, get caster sugar. It's slightly finer, so it mixes up easier. So if I'm training indoors, I can pour this straight into a bottle. If I'm going outdoors, I can put it into mega gel. It's fantastic. Which is a perfect segue onto carb mix. I'm a bit 50-50 on this. I don't mind using it, but now with the colder weather, I'm now experimenting more and using it more often. I tend to bring it with me because I have a bit of a bad habit where I don't grab gels and I sometimes get a bit bored of the same carb source or the same flavor, bit of flavor fatigue. So what I like bringing along with me, and again, shout out to Sturka, these are really cool. They're carb mixes in this little bag here. It's perfectly sized. They do 120 gram and they do a 60 gram. So I can bring 2 of these if I want, just pour it straight in, and I've now got carb mix. So with the cold weather, I can just put it into a bottle and I'm sorted. Another shout out as well to Decathlon. I found they do what we call isotonic drink, and it's got carb mix in it, but it also comes with this really clever little cap on the end. And I've measured this out. If you pour it in, the serving size is 38 grams. And if you fill this right to the top, it's 38 grams. So if you're traveling, really good option. They also do really good flavors. And I found this one bizarrely in Decathlon in Spain. In the UK, they seem to have just like raspberry and I think peach flavor. Whereas we go to Spain, they have like all these different flavors of it. And I saw this mint one. It tastes like an after eight without the chocolate. It's quite nice. It just breaks up some of that flavor fatigue. And it kind of brings me to the last bit here, which is solids. And this is one of my favorite things to bring on a ride, especially when you're on a flat. So if you've got a long flat section, solids are brilliant. They just break things up. It's just a bit of something to chew on as well. It's really nice. If you're going uphill, definitely swap to a carb mix or a gel. You already know where I'm going with this. Top product be Sturka Rice Bar. I think they're fantastic, really nice. My main critique though, in a wrapper. So these are really good, I find, actually, for the cafe stop. Like you saw with the Matchstick, even when we stay still, it's still burning. So by having something like this, just a really nice snack we can have, 50 grams of carbs, we're keeping those fuel tanks nice and topped up. Honorable mention goes to the classic flapjack. A lot of these are bizarrely, they're actually plant-based because they use like margarine instead of butter. But one thing to watch out for is they're quite high in fat. They can sit a little bit heavy on the stomach. There's another brand, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, OTE or OAT. They do palm oil free ones, which are like half the calories and really high in carbs. So essentially a very low fat flapjack. Fantastic choice. Again, for me, I like to keep the cost nice and low. Saurine is a really good option. Got to be a little bit careful because it is high in fiber. Same with dates. Got to be a little bit careful. What fiber can do is just slow down the digestion. You don't feel as hungry when you're not eating as much, and yeah, the match burns and you're not topping up. So the goat snack, and a shout out to Aldi here, is Walter Worms. These are 10 grams of carbs per sweet. You can open up the pack and just shove it straight in your back pocket in a jersey. So if I'm going out on a ride, I'm going to bring maybe 1 or 2 packs of these, depending how far I'm going. So let's say a 100k ride, bring Mega Gel, that's 400 grams of carbs. These as a backup, maybe a gel or 2 just to break up the flavor fatigue from the sugar. And if I'm planning a cafe stop, I can have some sweets as well. Just a bit of extra fuel. If I get stopped or pull over, or let's say I have a mechanical, it takes me, let's just say I'm not a very good mechanic, it takes me like 40 minutes to fix. I still need to keep some fuel up. So those would be my choices. These are fantastic. You can just put them in the back pocket. Low fiber, low protein, low fat, just absolute brilliant snack. One thing I'd say about sweets is to play around with them and just find out what works for you. Because one of the biggest issues I've found with sweets is sometimes they can be a little bit too chewy. So Aldi do wine gums, and I just find it just a little bit too much. Same with midget gems as well. They're just a little bit too chewy. And so you're spending ages, they're kind of hurting your teeth, whereas Walter Worms and Sour Patch Kids, fantastic. They're really quite soft to chew. That Sour Patch Kids, I haven't got any packs on me. They're fantastic though. Really soft, easy to chew, full of sugar, is exactly what you need. I think a whole bag is something like 120 grams of carbs. And my parting words on this video here, but if I could just give one piece of advice, and I'm probably talking to me in the past here as well. And if you're new to the channel, Well, you haven't seen me before. I used to weigh 96 kilos. At one point, I was morbidly obese. Even though I was cycling, I just couldn't really lose the weight. I had this weird idea that if I didn't eat on the bike, I would lose more weight. I'd hear all these people talking about, hey, I lost weight cycling. And I wondered how they did it. More miles would help and things like that. The best piece of advice I can tell you is you lose weight off the bike, not on the bike. You want to keep yourself nice and fueled up. And if there's one reason I could plead with you why it's so important to do so, is that if you don't fuel on the bike, what tends to happen is your body gets quite depleted, then it goes into overdrive. You can have these crazy eating marathons when you get back home. It's just unbelievable. You will eat the entire kitchen because you feel so hungry. And so if you eat on the bike, you stop that from happening. By the time you get back home, you're like, man, I'm full, probably don't want to eat anything. You'll grab a protein shake, you'll probably be good, light lunch, and that is kind of how you do it. But don't ever compromise on the bike. You want to have a great time, you want to push watts, get your fuel in, would be my top tip. Honorable mention as well, just from the bike, is Electrolyte tablet. I found this brand here, for goodness shakes. These are in Decathlon. I normally hate orange flavor. This tastes like Tango. Also another shout out to High Five. Really good stuff. To be honest, electrolytes, I know there's a big thing now. Do we need them? Do we not? I've seen so many guys on the side of the road telling me they're cramping up because it's been hot and not been drinking enough. A lot of these products, like the Carb mix, for example, have got electrolytes in. I tend to err on the side of caution. I have one bottle with water and one with electrolytes. So that way I'm always playing both sides. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I take on a ride. Usually a mega gel. I'm aiming for 100 grams of carbs an hour. I just play around and mix it up. If I'm doing lots of climbing, obviously more gels, carb mix. If it's going to be a bit more flat, zone 2, I'll bring some sweets as well. I always carry more fuel than I actually need. If it's cold as well, that can also sap your heat. Good to keep a little bit more fuel on you. Always carry more than you need. You'll be grateful to have that extra gel than to not have it. So yeah, that's what I bring on a ride. If you've got any more questions or want to know some more about nutrition, drop me a comment below and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.